Hello and welcome to our final edition of the Topic Tuesday webinar series for the 22-23 academic year. We're excited that you all are joining us today. As you are joining, we've got some housekeeping that we just want to remind you of. We are in webinar mode, and so during the presentation, we want to still engage with you. So feel free to use the chat box that you see at the bottom to communicate directly with the panelist. And if you have any questions, we would love for the larger group to be able to hear and see what those questions are. They may also have questions. So you'll see there's a Q&A box at the bottom. If you'll put your questions there, we'll be monitoring those throughout the webinar, and we'll be having our panelists either answer them live or we'll type answers in them. So use those two features to engage with us today. Now, as our friends are joining us, we've got a poll question. So the question is approximately how many students in Mississippi are currently living in foster care? So you'll see that poll show up on your screen. There are 4 options. If you'll indicate which answer you think to approximately how many students in Mississippi are currently living in foster care. All right, give everybody who's joining about a few more seconds to answer. All right. Last call for your poll question answer. Okay. So we're pretty evenly split across the board here, but the answer is approximately 4,000 students in Mississippi are currently living in foster care. And so that is what our webinar is all about today, is supporting foster youth and some new opportunities for them. So I'll hand it over to Shannon to get us started.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I am Shannon Grinsley, Assistant Director of External Training and Partnerships for the Woodward Hines Education Foundation and the Get to College program. We are recording today's session, and we will send a link to anyone who is registered. For those watching the recording, today's date is May 2nd, 2023, and the material in this webinar is current through the 22-23 school year. In today's session, the FACE Scholarship for Mississippi Foster Youth, you will hear from Jennifer Rogers at the Mississippi Office of Student Financial Aid, who will speak about the administration of the grant, and from Samantha Callahar from First Place for Youth about supporting Mississippi foster youth and what the FACE grant will mean to them. I will now share a little background on Get to College and a few logistics about the webinar before we get started. Get to College is a nonprofit program of the Woodward Hines Education Foundation. We have 3 centers in Mississippi, in Jackson, Ocean Springs, and South Haven. And we help parents, students, and high school counselors with all aspects of college planning and financial aid. And all of our services are free. In our centers, we offer personalized college counseling appointments where we can tell students when to apply for admission and scholarships, help fill out their FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, or advise on essay writing and interviewing. As we mentioned earlier during the webinar, we cannot see or hear you, but we do ask that you can put in your questions through the instant messenger or the chat at any time. Kirsten Dufour will be monitoring and replying to our Q&A today, but we will also have time for live Q&A with the presenters at the end. But as I said earlier, feel free to message your questions at any time. I would now like to introduce our guest speakers for the day. Our first speaker is Jennifer Rogers. Jennifer is the director of the Mississippi Office of Student Financial Aid. In that role, she oversees the administration of a $70 million annual budget and all state-supported student financial aid programs, including HELP, MTAG, and MESG. Since Rogers took leadership of the office in 2009, the office has reduced its administrative overhead while increasing the number of students eligible for the state's only need-based grant program by over 15 times. Jennifer received her undergraduate degree from the University of the South, or Sewanee, in Tennessee, her MBA from Millsaps College in Jackson, and her doctorate from the University of Mississippi. She is happily married with 2 children, 2 pups, a cat, and Jennifer, I didn't know this about you, she also owns a snake. You'll have to tell us more about that later. Our next speaker is Samantha Callahar. Samantha has a bachelor's of social work from Mississippi State University and over 25 years of nonprofit leadership and policy advocacy. She serves as the Mississippi Site Director for First Place for Youth. A former foster youth herself, Samantha leads the national nonprofit's transition-aged foster youth programming in the state. In this role, she leads Mississippi Youth Voice, a group of current and former foster youth using lived experience, data, and national best practices to inform policy and policy development. Samantha and Mississippi Youth Voice were the driving force behind House Bill 1313 in the 2022 legislative session, creating the Kincaid Faith Scholarship. Samantha also serves as the president of the board of the Mississippi Association of Child Caring Agencies that represents the nonprofit child welfare providers across the state. She also serves on the Mississippi Balance of State Continuum of Care Governing Council for HUD, Homelessness Funding Priorities, and as an advisory council member of the Projects of Hope initiative. When not working, Samantha enjoys reading and spending time with her family. She and her husband, John, live in Madison and have 5 children between the ages of 15 and 23 years of age. Jennifer and Samantha, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Okay. Shannon and Kirsten, thank you for having me today. And welcome to all of you who have come to learn about the Faith Scholarship. The State Representative Bill Kincaid Fostering Access and Inspiring True Hope Scholarship was created by the 2022 Mississippi Legislature to provide full cost of attendance scholarships to students who have interacted with the state's foster care system. And obviously that is quite a mouthful for the name of the scholarship. So we are just calling it by the acronym FAITH. But the program really came about because of some disturbing statistics and because, and to help these individual youth. Statistics show that 75% of all students in foster care or state custody arrangements become a single parent or enter the correction system by 25 years of age. And that is certainly not necessarily the life that we want for these students. So this program was designed to provide these students with an educational pathway. To be eligible, students must be a U.S. citizen or a Mississippi resident who is less than 25 years of age. Now, there are some allowances for military service. So if a student has served active duty in the military, they could possibly be older than 25 when they start the program. The student must file the FAFSA and other federal aid applications. So some students may possibly be eligible for like a education tuition voucher. That if they are, they may need to apply for that as well. But we are primarily just looking for students to complete the MAP, which is the Mississippi Aid application, and the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. Students must also meet one of the following criteria. They must have been in the legal custody of Child Protection Services at any time since the age of 13. So that could mean that they enter CPS at 7 or 8, and they remain in CPS custody through their 13th birthday and beyond. Or it could mean that they go into the system on their 13th birthday or after their 13th birthday. Or the student could also have lived in a qualified residential facility at any time since their 13th birthday. Or the student could have been adopted from Child Protection Services or a qualified residential living facility at any time since their 13th birthday. The only other requirement is that a student must enroll in an educational program in the state of Mississippi. That could be a certificate program, an associate's degree program, or a bachelor's degree program. Any type of undergraduate program at least half-time in order to be eligible. The scholarship does award up to the full cost of attendance. So for any of you who may not be experts on how we calculate financial aid for higher education, cost of attendance includes everything. That is not just tuition and required fees, but that is also room and board, which is your housing and your food. But also there are expense allowances for travel to and from school and work, and for miscellaneous expenses such as computers and books and just basic living supplies, your toothbrushes, your toothpaste, your other personal care items. And so this scholarship is truly designed for students to be able to take advantage of the scholarship and leave with a college credential with no debt. So there is no expectation that these students will have to take out any loans. We also know that housing can be an issue for these students. They are housing insecure often. And so many of our institutions offer housing during breaks. So like during a winter or fall break, when the college closes, sometimes students are left without a place to live. So these students would be able to take advantage of college housing. And if there's any cost associated with that, over and above the student's regular cost of attendance, the state will pay that as part of this scholarship. The application opened last October, October the 1st of 2022, and it will remain open until September 15th, 2023. And then the next year's application will open on October 1st of 23. So there really is no, there is about a 15-day delay when the application is unavailable, but there is actually no deadline for students to apply. So students are free to apply throughout the year. And as you know, if funds are available and they are eligible, they will be awarded. We will begin making awards for this program for the first time for fall of 2023. We can go on to the next slide. So how will the FAITH scholarship be awarded? The first thing that the student needs to do is they need to do the Mississippi Aid application and identify themselves as a foster youth. There are several questions on the application to determine whether a student has has been in Child Protection Services or has lived in one of the qualified residential living facilities. The student must also file the free application for federal student aid. So once the state aid receives the student's FAFSA, and we get those automatically if the student is a Mississippi resident, so the student doesn't need to do anything special to make sure that the state aid office gets that. And we receive and they complete their map and say they're in a foster care. Then if they say they were under the care of Child Protection Services, then CPS will receive a notice that they need to certify the student's eligibility, and the same with the living facilities. They will be the ones to certify whether or not the student is actually eligible, whether the student has been in their custody or not. The Student Financial Aid Office does not have access to all of those records, and we do not have a way to certify that eligibility. So we are relying fully on CPS and the living facilities to certify whether or not students are eligible. Once CPS or the living facility certifies eligibility, then the state aid office will make an estimated award to the student. So we'll send a notice to the student that says, you're eligible. You are going to receive funding through this program. We believe your estimated award will be around, and we will give them a number that is based on the college's 2022-23 cost of attendance, because right now we don't have the cost of attendance for the actual age year where they will be enrolling. And so we will, as soon as we have those certifications of eligibility and completion of the FAFSA, we're going to tell these students, okay, you have aid coming your way. This is about what we think it's going to be. We will send you an actual award offer later on in the year. Our effort with this is to try to go ahead and give students an idea that they have a large amount of funds coming to them to cover all of their expenses. At the same time that we make that estimated award offer to the student, we're going to be going to the institution and asking the institution to send us actual aid information. So the institution will actually be providing to us the student's actual cost of attendance, and cost of attendance can vary from student to student. So every single student may not have the same cost of attendance. So the institution has to tell us what that student's cost of attendance is and how much other grant aid they are receiving. So that student will likely be receiving a federal Pell Grant. They may also be receiving an education tuition voucher. They may also be receiving an institutional grant or some sort of private grant. Any of that aid will be taken into account first. There will be no expectation of loans, so only grant aid will be considered. Then at the end, after all of that aid is considered, then the state will fill any gaps up to the student's total cost of attendance. So we will base our award offer on the other grant, on the gap, on how much the student needs to have a full cost of attendance scholarship. And so then once we receive that information from the school, then we will email the student again and update the student's MAP account and give them an actual award offer. If anything changes throughout the year or after we make that actual award offer, we will update the student's aid package. The student, one other piece about that, the student will also not be expected to work. So if the student chooses to work, that's fine, but there is no expectation that the student must work while receiving the Faith Scholarship. The next slide just has a link to, and I apologize, that's actually supposed to be an orange. It's hard to see, but the Faith Scholarship website can be found at www.msfinancialaid.org/faith. There is information there. We will be, if things come up, this is our first year to administer this program. So we ask for a little grace and patience as we go. And as we learn more, we will post information to that Faith website. And then the last slide is just the contact information for the state aid office. Please feel free to contact us. We do ask that specific questions about a student's eligibility, like if you have a scenario and say, is this student gonna, this student lived in foster care, but then they, were not. We really cannot answer those questions in our office because we do not have any access to the student's records, and we are not making that that final determination. So we do ask that you not direct those questions to us. Students can contact their caseworkers or possibly just contact, if they lived in one of the living facilities, contact the home directly, or contact the the Child Protection Services directly. But any other questions not related to the certification of eligibility as a foster youth, we are happy to take those questions and answer those.
Jennifer, well, I know that you just said not specifics. We do have a question for you before we slide to our next presenter, and they have a question about an international adoption. So a student was adopted from Colombia at the age of 14. The student is a U.S. citizen and resident of Mississippi. Is that a student that may qualify for the Faith Scholarship?
Well, I mean, she had to have been in CPS custody or lived in one of those qualified residential living facilities. So, so that would be, I mean, I honestly cannot answer that question because I don't know the history of you know, how her interaction with the foster care system went.
That's helpful. I think through your presentation, it kind of clarified maybe some of those scenarios as those determining factors. So thanks for answering it.
Yeah,
Alright.
I think just if we don't have a way of, I think she would have had to have been in CPS custody or in one of the qualified residential living facilities. And there are only 3 of those in the state. And they are Berean, Sunnybrook, and Mississippi Baptist Children's Village. There is not a maximum number of students that can receive the scholarship. There is a the state has set aside $2 million for this first year. So we are going to award those funds on a first come first served basis based on eligibility. And you know, if the funds run out, then we would no longer be able to award students. But there, so we hope that the funds go as far as possible and are able to serve as many students as possible. But you know, we'll just kind of have to see. And certainly if we spend all of that money this year, we will ask the legislature for more money in future years.
So the only other question for you, Jennifer, is just a clarification question is, so how much faith money a student receives depends on the other aid that they will receive. So in other words, the faith fills in any gaps.
Yeah, it is a last dollar scholarship, but it's last dollar up to the full cost of attendance. So a lot of last dollar scholarships only fill like up to tuition. And this is different in that if there are any gaps all the way up to the full cost of attendance, which, you know, at a public university is going to be, you know, as much as $27,000 a year. Then, you know, it would fill anything over the, you know, let's say a student is only eligible for a federal Pell Grant and they're not getting any other aid, but they are attending one of our 8 public universities and their total cost of attendance is, you know, let's just say $25,000 a year. The Faith Grant would cover everything over the Pell Grant. So if a Pell Grant's what, $73.95 next year or something, somewhere around that, 7,400-ish, the Faith Grant would cover the remaining, you know, $17,000-$18,000.
And the last question that we have is, does it need to be a renewal each year or is it a one-time like application?
So yes, students will need to reapply every year. They will need to do both the FAFSA and the MAP application, and that is standard for just about every financial aid program out there. But they will not have to be recertified as eligible every year. So once a student is certified as eligible the first time they apply, they will be considered eligible every year, but they do need to do the application, because if they don't do the application, we don't know that they're enrolled. That's what tells us that they're going to school, where they're going to school, how many hours they're taking, and that sort of thing. And if their contact information changes. So that's what helps us keep up with the students and to know which institution to pay on behalf of the student. And one other thing that I meant to tell you, if you know of students who are already in school, so let's say that you've got a student that is not an incoming freshman, there may be a junior, but they qualify, they can apply too. There's no requirement that these be new students.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think that covers all the questions that were in the Q&A for the time being. So we will turn it over to you now, Samantha.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. I did want to cover. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. I did want to cover two things that I think would be questions that I would have while we still have Jennifer really fresh here. One of the things is that it goes up to 5 years of schooling, and it maxes out at a bachelor's degree. The other thing is that in order to maintain the scholarship, you need to maintain academic standing with the university. So if the university is still allowing you to take classes, then you should still be eligible for the scholarship. And so those were two of the points about the continued eligibility that I think some of that we've gotten questions on as well. So yeah, so I wanted to kind of share with you, our organization works with the youth aging out of foster care. This was a huge priority for the youth that we work with in terms of their ability to be successful and to see a future for themselves as they're leaving the foster care system. And last year, there was a large group of people working on this initiative. And unlike some policy efforts, everybody in the room was trying to find a way to say yes. And so that really made this possible, Jennifer being one of those. So I do want to thank Jennifer for helping find all the solutions to all the problems that came up throughout this process. And we'll continue to work out kinks as it goes on. But I'm excited to share with you today a little bit more about how to make this successful. As Shannon shared, I work with youth that are aging out. I have a youth board, and the youth board's goal is to take their lived experiences as foster youth in the Mississippi foster care system and create policy and program change for those coming behind them. We last year worked on the Kincaid Scholarship. We also worked on some leasing laws, driver's license access, things like that for the foster youth. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure of with this passage of this scholarship is it's great to get these youth into college. What do we need to do to keep them in college? Money is a huge hurdle, and it is a primary hurdle, but it's not the only hurdle that these youth are facing. And so we have worked over the past year on recommendations for what needs to go around this scholarship to make sure these youth are successful and able to not just enroll, but to stay in school and to achieve that degree or that certification or whatever their culminating goal is with their education. And so I want to share from our youth perspective what some of those things are. Some of those things you'll see, may be covered in that cost of attendance calculation, because we were very cognizant to look at what other states were doing, where they've run into problems and where they've had success. And so we got to take the lessons learned from 35 other states to build this scholarship. But a couple of the things that we're going to go over for the next few minutes are those other things that wrap around that ability to stay in school. Belonging, connection, guidance and mentoring, basic needs, access to healthcare, some considerations for cost of attendance. Jennifer kind of talked about those, so we'll go through those quickly. And then special needs and special populations, because being a foster kid, there's a lot of other things that sometimes come with that. So we'll kind of just go into that. I want to share with you that this comes from the lived experience of our youth. Things to look at when we're looking at what makes it different about foster youth going off to college. And like I said, like she said, I was a foster youth. I got a scholarship to Mississippi State and was grateful. It was a big adjustment for me coming from the foster care system onto a college campus. These youth are coming with very little support. You know, mom's not moving them into the dorm on that first day. You know, their mom's not necessarily there to call when they have an issue with a professor, or, you know, when they're just kind of figuring out what college is like. They also, many of these students don't have a history of attending college campuses and going to games or seeing what the college life looks like. It's a big reality shift coming from, you know, the foster care system onto a college campus where we're looking, you know, at more of a normative environment. And so that's a big part of, you know, kind of getting acclimated to that. There's a lack of trust. Adults and systems for years traditionally have lied, disappointed, not followed through, shuffled these kids around. And so there's just a lack of trust in adults, in systems, in people actually caring that, you know, that their needs are met. These youth are coming from environments where they had very little control over their environment. You know, as Shannon shared, I have 5 kids. You know, one's finished college, one's in college, another one's going next year, and then 2 15-year-olds that we just hope survive. But that we, you know, we've raised them to start taking more control of their life, start owning their interactions, you know, with doctors, with teachers, with things like that. Well, in the foster care system, that doesn't always happen for these youth. And so that experience in making their own decisions or having to problem solve their own problems sometimes is problematic for them coming onto this. And then the social disparities. I'll be honest, you know, I felt like an imposter on a college campus coming from foster care. And does everybody else know that I don't fit, that I don't belong here, that I'm different from them? And just that feeling of being so different is really hard, you know, whether it's something the youth realize or whether it's something that's you know, subconscious to them. So these are some of the things that the youth are really kind of coming from as they enter the college campuses. The first thing we'll talk about is that belonging and that connection. And these are some of the things that the campuses or those supporting the youth can do to help with that. So we can kind of go on to the next slide. Orientation. You know, making sure that the youth do come to orientation, making sure that they see that campus, making sure that they get plenty of visits or time to understand what that experience is going to be like. It's a new environment. Yes, these youth, most of them, if they're exiting out of foster care or were in foster care as a teenager, they bounced around. They've lived in new environments, but helping them to find just kind of comfort and familiarity with the campus. And then we would highly suggest, you know, some campuses do this where maybe there's a session during orientation or a pre-session where they can really kind of connect with other foster youth or other services that are specific to their needs. A dedicated program. I will say some of the campuses have a dedicated program, whether it's for foster youth or first generation students, students whose, you know, parents didn't go to college, grandparents, they're the first ones taking this journey onto a college degree. Having those types of settings so that the youth can find connection, find other people who understand what they're feeling and how that adjustment, you know, goes as you're moving on to that campus. And then hopefully after they're there a year or two, they become those that are helping the new people. Promoting access to clubs and organizations. You want youth to be engaged on those college campuses, and we want them to feel this experience like everybody else. And so creating access points for them, making sure that there's opportunities for clubs that meet their needs. My daughter is the 3rd one going to the same university, and when we went through orientation, the student support services said, you know, we create new programs every year that students bring to us. And so, you know, just kind of helping them to find their groups and their associations. I'm going to share some lived experience at the end, and you'll kind of see where these recommendations come from. And then the other things like the cost of campus activities, participating in different things on campus and sporting events or activities or fun things that are going on campus, looking at ways that we can waive fees or maybe help them with costs associated to those things so that they can participate in that. And go on. The other is guidance and mentoring, and that sounds kind of the same, but I'm going to share on the next slide kind of the delineation of that. When we're talking about guidance, we're talking about a supportive adult who's willing to be patient, who's willing to advocate for that student. If that student is having a hard time with a professor or a hard time in a subject, helping them to understand how to get their needs met, how to get served, how to get mentoring, how to get tutoring, those types of services. So having that point person of an adult who understands the systems, the departments, all of the navigation of the student services and the financial aid and all of that, who's willing to help them. I've done that for my kids, and it's taken a lot of time. It's taken a lot of my energy, and for youth coming in without an adult who's spending that time and energy, that's got to be overwhelming, and many of our youth say it is. Having such a large system that they're having to engage with multiple points of contact, helping to navigate that is key. And then making sure it's not just at the beginning of the year, but it's something that is proactive, reaching out, how is this going? Are you running into any problems? And then being available throughout the year. One of the key things about it being proactive is, as I said, the trust in systems, the trust in people caring is something that has to be overcome. And so somebody reaching out and saying, hey, I just wanted to make sure you were doing good, they're probably not going to reach out to you, unless, it's a proactive response. Like, this person actually does want to hear from me and does want to know how I'm doing. And that's great. And then the other side of that is having mentoring, and that's supportive peers. And so supportive peers helping to make those social connections and communicate about what college life is like and how to engage in different things. Checking on the students. The university my daughter's going to, when we went through orientation and all the different things, they shared that they assign each student another student, and if they're missing classes, they check on them. Is this student sick? Is this student missing? Is this student overwhelmed? Does somebody know that I haven't shown up to class for 4 days? And making sure that I'm on somebody's radar is really important. These youth are vulnerable. They don't have family members who are checking on them. And so without a proactive approach to making sure that they have connections, they could easily get lost. They could easily have issues and nobody know about it until, it's problematic. And then, having peers help you connect to common interests within your major, maybe within classes, and just kind of helping to navigate those systems. And then this is not a new concept. This is something that happens on other college campuses, and that we're willing to help navigate schools who want to take some of these national models and put them into their programs. In Mississippi, there's training, there's models, there's years of experience with this. And so it has become a best practice that we've seen great output across the country. Basic needs. Jennifer talked about the fact that the scholarship covers a lot of their basic needs. We looked at a lot of that when we were looking at what it would mean for these youth to go to college and stay in college. I'm going to cover just a couple of pillars of what that is, and maybe some things that need to be supplemented or need to be considered in this. But housing is key, making sure that they do have that housing for breaks, making sure that that is included in their cost of attendance, making sure that it is communicated, that they know they need to note that they need the housing for the breaks. I do see some of our navigators and some of our different people who are supporting the youth on this call. So making sure that that is proactively communicated. The other thing is helping with roommate selection. How do you pick a roommate who might understand kind of that, the special needs of this population? Or how do we group people and kind of filter that into the roommate selection process? And then when the youth are getting older, when they're ready to move off campus and continue their education, what is that support and how does that look like? How do we help them to secure off-campus housing and tie that into their scholarships and things? The second is food. The cost of attendance does cover the meal plans, making sure that they're selecting robust meal plans that meet their needs, as well as food during those breaks. Many of our youth say that if they were able to stay on campus in the past, the food services were shut down. So how were they navigating food during those times and things like that? And then additionally, do the campuses offer classes that could be electives or things on life skills, cooking or home economics or things like that? I know I sound like a very old lady saying home economics, but some of those types of opportunities or even non-credit offerings of life skills classes. Personal care, there is personal care funds built into cost of attendance, but without transportation, do a lot of the youth have access to purchasing that to retail locations, or do we have a way to communicate with them on how to get things shipped in, you know, from Amazon or things like that? And then also those dorm supplies. Are we setting those youth up with what they need in their dorms in terms of their bedding, their supplies, their towels and blankets and everything like that, and making sure that we have support built around that? Not all of this is meant for the colleges or anyone specific. These are things that as a system we have to look at to make sure these youth are ready when they get to college. The last one is access to transportation. Do they have access off campus to go get the things that they need? Do they have access for doctor's appointments or for things like that? And then what is available on campus? Where can they go get a toothbrush if they need one? Where can they get things like that? And then additionally, is there the ability for college campuses to offer driver's training so that youth who have not come onto campus with a driver's license can get that skill so that they can work towards, you know, being more independent? Healthcare access. This one is actually something that I think our group plans to work proactively on in the next year and beyond, and making sure that the youth have access to medical services. If they have aged out of foster care, or if they were not adopted but reunified or different courses, most of these youth are going to have Medicaid. Many of our health service providers on our college campuses do not accept Medicaid as an insurance. And so we need to address that. We need to look at how do our youth, once they get to campus, how do they get access to healthcare that does not cost them more than it would if their insurance was taken? How do they get access to mental health services? Do the mental health services on campuses take health insurance? Do they understand trauma and things like that? And if not, how are we making referrals to those services close by for these youth, as well as prescription services and specialists and for follow-up care and dental, vision, all of those things. Looking at the college community and making sure that the youth can access a full cadre of health and mental health services that are Medicaid provided or that are covered under their insurance or at no cost. The cost of attendance considerations, Jennifer talked about some of those. We tried to bake as many as we could, but also making sure that these are communicated and delineated. Housing for academic breaks, housing during orientation. My daughter's coming to orientation and we're paying an extra fee for her to stay on campus during orientation. Also costs for staying on campus during those I'll say new Marine camp for Mississippi State, where you're coming in early and you're doing things. Those are a lot of times out-of-pocket housing expenses, and looking at ways that we can cover those so that the youth can participate fully in those experiences. Looking at those food services during the break. How are youth accessing food during those breaks that we are hopefully able to provide them housing, how are they accessing sustenance, food, and their basic needs during that time? And then additionally, for those that do come to campus with parking, how are we, are there ways to cover parking passes, fees, and things like that into the cost of attendance? Technology, laptop allowance, printer allowance, usually a flat rate, but communicating and making sure that that is baked into this. And then I went pie in the sky and I put phone allowance, because we all know a phone really isn't optional anymore in the world. It is how you operate, and many of the courses require check-ins or integration that, really is made easier by having a phone. Student activities, are the student activities fees built in, or is there a possibility, whether it's in cost of attendance or other ways to look at, youth being able to access, things like sporting events or events that come to campus that others, would generally have their parents pay for. Fees for clubs and organizations, the fitness centers and those other types of activities, and the intramural sports and events like that. All of these little things that add up. And when you're looking at those excess funds from the cost of attendance being for your personal needs, making sure that, these seemingly small recurring and incidental fees, don't kind of drain that or make the youth not be able to participate fully in the college experience. Other things are, the option and the availability of work study. If they do want to work, they do want to earn excess funds. Many of our campuses are in more remote areas, especially our junior colleges and things. And so access to off-campus or on-campus employment without work study is also something to look at. And then how are we tying in the ETV funds? I think as this goes further into multiple years, hopefully we'll refine the process for integrating those ETV funds from Child Protective Services into this cost of attendance, to spread the funding out and make sure we have funding for anybody who needs that. And then looking at those account holds, making sure there's no account holds. Hopefully this goes away with the full cost of attendance scholarship, but many of our youth have run into issues at the end of semesters or things where there's funds left on their account that they can't pay. They've been waiting for funding from the state, and so they could not register for their next courses or things like that. And then also helping our youth who have issues with documentation, whether it is birth certificates, social security cards, things like that coming from the system. There's often issues accessing those so that we can qualify for many of the programs. At the beginning, Shannon and I think it was actually Jennifer shared some of the data on what happens to this population as a trend if they aren't supported. And so some of those additional issues are coming onto campus with these youth, whether it's disabilities, whether it's mental health disabilities, learning disabilities, or other disabilities, and making sure that we are connecting them with those services and those programs. Career coaching, planning, job placement. Many of us who have our own children, we're working with our kids on that. We've been talking to them about that, but not having that parental unit that is able to do that, making sure that we're navigating them to that they're picking careers that fit them, that they're picking careers that work to their strengths and such. And then also looking at childcare supports. So, knowing that by age 21, over 50% of the youth who were in foster care at their 19th birthday, the data showing that they are parenting by that time, having access to childcare and to supports for that is a real barrier for youth to be able to go to school and stay in school. We talked about the life skills. I'm trying to go fast because I am watching the time. Talking about life skills and study skills classes, some of those types of things that maybe are either for credit or not for credit, that can be offered, just to help youth be more prepared. Additionally, tax preparation. And then that tax preparation feeding into their FAFSA for subsequent years so that they can renew and continue staying on college and accessing those the scholarship and those other grants and funding opportunities. And then specialized support for those, those students that are thriving that could benefit from study abroad or co-ops or internships, and making sure that they are knowledgeable about those, that they're accessing those, and that those opportunities are afforded to the students so that they come out well prepared for their careers and for their degrees that they're earning on these campuses. I want to share very quickly, and then you guys will have these slides, but I did want to share quotes from some of our youth who have been going to college and what they face. And so I'm going to go through a couple of these real quickly, and then you can read some. This one says, once again, no one has checked on me to ask how I'm doing. I've had to figure everything out on my own. I know that I am a legal adult, but I know all of my friends still depend on their parents to some degree. I do not have a car. Their parents bought them a car. My point being is that I have to figure everything out on my own. These are direct quotes from our youth when we talked about what their experience was. We can go to the next one. I had a hard time doing my FAFSA. I could not understand it because no one even taught me about taxes or anything. I had some workers help me, mainly workers from community college. I would have been completely lost without this help. I see a lot of students struggle with the same thing, especially kids in the system. I'll do one or two more. While attending college my freshman year, I experienced many troubles leaving my dorm for the holidays. Last minute, my social worker would start attempting to find me placement. I didn't really have family I could go to. For Christmas, I resided at a friend's house I met while in school because of the lack of effort put into finding me placement. And we'll do one more. Entering college, I was filled with excitement and determination to succeed academically. I was eager to immerse myself in my area of study and follow my passions. However, I soon found myself struggling with certain courses that were unrelated to my interests and major. These classes, which were part of the general education requirement, left me feeling disconnected and disengaged. I began to lose motivation and found it increasingly difficult to keep up with the course assignments. And so, there's a few more slides that really kind of share, kind of that disconnectedness that the youth faced. Our student got turned sideways on this one. And so, that connection is huge. Those are some of the more intangible things that these youth are facing as they go onto a college campus. And so any of these supports that we can build, whether they're on the campuses or they're within programs that you guys are working in or have access to, this is what's going to help these youth not just go to college, but stay in college and complete college.
All right, thank you, Samantha, for that information. I'm gonna, while Shannon continues to flip through the shared voices of your student group, I'm gonna bring Jennifer to up, and we have a question that I think both of you maybe can tackle here. The question is how are currently enrolled students finding out about this scholarship? And then subsequently, there's an eligibility question. The student just needs to be able to enroll, not on a particular academic standing. For example, a student can be on academic probation and still receive the scholarship.
So, Sam may have more insight about currently enrolled students, but I know we have made the institutions very aware of the scholarship, and we've been talking about it with them for over a year since the legislature passed it. So the institution financial aid office have been encouraged to look at their population. They know what students are, in large part, they know what students are foster youth and what students fall in this category. So we've encouraged them to reach out to those students, make sure that they apply, make sure that they identify as potentially eligible. And so, now, how much of that is happening, I don't know, but that is certainly, we have encouraged them to do that, and we've been talking about it a good bit and sending out information from our office. We are primarily only communicating with the financial aid offices though. So, you know, there is sometimes a disconnect between what gets communicated with the financial aid office and then communicated out with the rest of the school. But that is one thing that we're doing in our office. Sam, I don't know if you want to tag on to that before we move on to the other part.
I think real quickly, working through CPS, we've been communicating it. We have over 250 youth in our program that are
All of our phones are going off because of the emergency alert. Sorry, they are on silent.
we've been communicating about the scholarship, but I also think the way the process is set up, that when you do your FAFSA and then you go to your state aid page, which they would need to be doing anyways, they are checking that box. So honestly, there's going to be students who may not know about it, but they're going to get Jennifer's letter and they're going to get a big surprise. And so because it is built into the process, so streamlined, I think that's catching most of those youth because it is a specific question that was put on the FAFSA federally years ago. And so the navigation doesn't take any extra steps. It's what they should already be doing to be going to college. And so some of them, it may actually just be a $20,000 surprise.
Yeah, and the state aid questions have not been on there, but for a year now. But it's part of, they can't skip that question. That is part of the regular application, so they will see that state aid application question as well. The second part of the question, eligibility. So a student does have to be making what we call SAP, satisfactory academic progress. So if the school determines that the student is meeting the SAP requirements of the college, then yes, they are eligible. If they are not meeting the SAP requirements, then no, they would not be eligible.
Well, that's all the questions that we have right now. So thank you for adding all of that context to the questions that come in. They're really informative. We'll hand it over to Shannon. If there's any other questions that come through in the next couple of minutes, we'll wrap, but let Shannon kind of talk about the next steps for the upcoming school year for Topic Tuesday.
All right. Thank you all so much for the great information. I know I was taking lots of notes. I hope that everyone found this presentation helpful as we begin to think about what our work with students will look like with the addition of the Space Scholarship. We will email you the recording for this webinar in the next couple of days, and we will post it on our YouTube channel. We would appreciate it if you would complete the short survey that will automatically pop up at the end of the meeting. Please fill it out and give us feedback on today's webinar so that we can keep improving. All right, so as Kirsten said earlier, today's webinar was the last of our spring series. We are happy to announce that we will continue the Topic Tuesday series for the 23-24 school year. So I think the survey today and the ones we've been collecting along the way are very important because there is a place there for you to list any topics that you'd be interested in hearing about. We look at those, we take those topics into consideration. So any suggestions that you have for us on something you'd be interested in hearing next year, we'd love to hear them. And we will be creating that schedule in the next month. And those Topic Tuesdays and other training opportunities will be released on our website in July of 2023. The CEU policy will be the same for next year as it has been for this year. If you've participated in 5 webinars for this school year, you can apply for 0.5 CEUs. And if you attend all 10 fall and spring webinars, you can apply for 1 full CEU, and that's the same next year as it is this year. So speaking of CEUs, since we're at the end of our series, I will submit all participants' total hours to Mississippi College for their review. I will also be emailing each participant that has the hour credentials, a participant form with their hours listed, and the form from Mississippi College that you can use to submit and pay for your CEU credits. So again, you will be responsible for completing that form and paying for your CEU credits if you get one of those from me. I'll be working on that over the next week or so. But please email me if you have any questions about your CEUs once you get my email. So Kirsten, if you'll drop my email in there in the chat, that'd be great. So if y'all have any questions about that, let me know. So with that, just like this year, once we add all of Topic Tuesdays and the other training opportunities, you will be able to register on the Get to College site. The Topic Tuesdays will be listed under the educator heading and then select Topic Tuesdays events. While you're there this summer registering for all your Topic Tuesday events, please check out the other resources for you and your students listed under that educator tab. Also, make sure that you read your July College Countdown Mississippi newsletter that will be released on July 1st to see a list of other training opportunities from Get to College that will be offered in the next school year. There will be lots to choose from and something for everyone. As always, thank you for being here as we close out the school year for Topic Tuesday. We hope that you all have a wonderful summer, and we look forward to seeing everyone back here in the early fall for our training opportunities.